A showdown at Charlotte, the continued improvement of Hendrick Motorsports, and what in the world is going on with the tires of Joe Gibbs Racing. All today on the newly titled The Fifth Turn Podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to The Fifth Turn. That is what I have decided to name this podcast. I thought it was a clever title. Got a lot of positive feedback surrounding that name, so that's what we're going to go with. So I'm CJ Ward, if you didn't already know, and welcome into The Fifth Turn. Really good race weekend at Charlotte this week. Charlotte is always a fun track to go to. It's always good racing. I've only been there once. I went to the Xfinity playoff race there in 2017 when Alex Bowman won the race. Got the diecast of that one. Excuse me. Yeah, it's always a good show. This aero package has really done wonders for mile and a half. So I have to say that it's really provided good racing. And we had two incredible races this weekend in the Xfinity Series and then in the Cup Series with the Coke 600. So let's start talking about the Xfinity Series. It was entertaining. I was actually at a graduation party, so I missed the first stage. But of course, we had the drivers only broadcast, which is always entertaining. And whenever you get guys like Clinton Boyer up in the booth, it's a fun time for sure. Of course, you told that story about your buns boiling and all that crazy stuff that could only come from the mouth of Clinton Boyer, of course. But yeah, it was a great race, great weekend all around. Tyler Reddick came out with a win after basically a dominant win. My prediction for this year is that he's going to go back-to-back and win another championship. I mean, he has already won as many races now this year as he did all of last year when he won the championship. And this year in Xfinity really is proving to be the Reddick and Bell show. Those two are basically winning everything. I mean, you had a couple of other winners. Cole Custer has won. He's not that far behind the two of them. Michael Annett has also won. But, I mean, Reddick and Bell are just dominating the series. Both of them, at some point, are going to be full-time Cup drivers. I think Reddick gets that opportunity before Bell does. Reddick is already, running that third car for Childress in the Cup Series for a handful of races. He's going to have several more this year, and he's doing well in that car. Bell, I don't think that there is an opening for him yet. Obviously, he wants to stay with Toyota. Obviously, he wants to stay in the Gibbs family, and there's just not that opening yet. And my advice for Christopher Bell is don't be in a rush. What wouldn't be a good move for Christopher Bell would be to move up to the Cup Series just for the heck of moving up to the Cup Series and have to settle for a lower performing car. I don't think that's the wise move. I think he should stay in Xfinity for as long as he can. I mean, we've seen Reddick and Bell have really put on a show this year as second year drivers, and it's been fun to watch the two of them. They were rookies last year. They won a lot, but it's fun to see them progressing in their ability this year as second-year Xfinity drivers. That was something that William Byron never had the opportunity to do in any of the other series that he's just now doing in the Cup Series. He's finally a second-year driver, and you're seeing the level of progression. You're seeing him actually move forward in his ability, which is very good to see. And I think Christopher Bell should take advantage of that and stay in that 20 car for as long as he can, and then only move up to the Cup Series when the opportunity is right. A lot of people are talking about, well, Levine family might field the second car for him. There's a Gibbs alliance there. But yeah, that 95 car, Matt DiBenedetto, they had a flash of brilliance at Daytona. I mean, they've had moments, but they're still, they are not the new Furniture Row. Furniture Row was able to have Gibbs equipment and that alliance and go whoop everybody's butts. Levine family is not there. They are still an underfunded, low budget, underperforming team, and I think that's the way that it's going to be for a while. And I don't think that is the right opportunity for Christopher Bell to jump into the Cup Series. Maybe if you want to run a handful of races, kind of like Tyler Reddick is doing, and kind of expose yourself to it, Levine family might not be a bad idea, but don't stay there. Don't make that your full-time Cup effort, because it's not going to go well. So that would be my advice for Christopher Bell. But it is very fun to see Reddick and Bell dominating the series as second-year drivers, and really progressing in their skill level. Let's talk about the heat this weekend. Holy cow, is it hot! And I mean, especially after that Xfinity race, you saw, I saw a picture on NASCAR.com. There was like 3 or 4 ambulances on pit road just attending to all the different drivers who were suffering from heat exhaustion and issues like that. I mean, Jeffrey Earnhardt, career day, finished third in the 18. He practically collapsed after the race. There was a lot of guys that were really, really struggling with the heat. I mean, it was really hot out there. I can only imagine what those guys were going through. It was tough. It was a tough, grueling race for those guys, and I really got to hand it to them. Anybody who says NASCAR drivers aren't athletes, give me a break. Just watch this weekend and see what these guys had to go through in order to grind this out. I mean, guys like Austin Dillon too, who ran almost all of both races. That was insane. I mean, these guys are definitely athletes. You've got to be able to put up with what a lot of these guys are putting up with week in, week out. So, and I mean, especially guys like Ross Chastain, who I've got a hero card of over there, big fan of. He has run every race of all 3 series so far. Sometimes 3 races on a weekend. That is insane. And the fact that he's running really well in the Truck Series, still having that subpar 4 car in the Xfinity Series, but these guys are definitely athletes. So anybody who says differently does not know what they're talking about. The other big story of the Xfinity race, which later translated into the Cup race as well, was Joe Gibbs Racing and their wacky tire problems. I mean, all 3 Xfinity cars, and if you count Levine family, 4 out of the 5 Cup cars, all had tire issues at Charlotte. Christopher Bell and Brandon Jones blew tires on the same lap and smacked the wall. Bell was done for the day because he tried to stay out so he wouldn't get penalized for pitting too soon. And the tire just shredded and tore the car apart. Jones was able to continue, as was Jeffrey Earnhardt after he spun with a tire issue. That was weird. That's not something that we see out of Joe Gibbs Racing that often. They are a superstar, dominant, Cup-level team. I mean, they are dominating the Cup Series. Them and Team Penske. What in the world was going on? I mean, that must have been a really big embarrassment to Toyota, newly inducted Hall of Famer Joe Gibbs. Coach must not have been happy. I wouldn't have been if I were coach, because that was ridiculous. I mean, how do you have 7 tire failures in a weekend with your company? How does that happen? Because it happened to Christopher Bell, Brandon Jones, and Jeffrey Earnhardt in Xfinity. It happened to Matt DiBenedetto, Denny Hamlin, and Martin Truex Jr. And Eric Jones in the Cup Series. What is happening? You just don't see that out of that team very often. And it was only that team, really. I mean, the 2 JTG Dougherty cars had issues like that in the Cup Series as well in the Coke 600, but that was bizarre, and that's really not something that you see out of Joe Gibbs Racing very often. And I figure they're going to have to be doing a lot of R&D this week to try to figure out why that was happening and how to stop it, because that's just unacceptable for a team of that caliber. But yeah, it was a very entertaining race, to say the least. You had it was the kind of thing where, to a certain extent, you were never sure who was going to win. Because Christopher Bell looked dominant, those two Gibbs cars, and then they had their issues, and Reddick just kind of ran away with it. So do a quick run through the top 10. Tyler Reddick, Justin Allgaier came second. Jeffrey Earnhardt, another like I said, career day, finished third. Noah Gragson fourth. Justin Haley fifth. Great top 5 for Kaulig Racing. Michael Annett sixth. He is having a career year after getting that first win at Daytona. He has always been the other guy at Junior Motorsports. The past several years, he's been the only one out of the 4 of them who's missed the playoffs. He's locked in this year, and he seems to have speed. That was always the thing. Was it was never odd situations that would take him out. He just never had speed, and he's got speed this year. Finished 6th. Jeb Burton 7th. Ryan Sieg finished 8th. I don't know what has happened to that team this year, but they have upped their game, and they are consistently running in the top 10, consistently having really good speed week in, week out, running up there with the top teams. Austin Cindric 9th, Brandon Jones 10th. Some other highlights: Ross Chastain 11th, John Hunter Nemechek 12th, Jeremy Clements, decent day, in 13th, Greg Galding 14th. Chase Briscoe had a real good car for a lot of the race and then got into the wall late. He ended up 19th. Cole Custer 24th after a lot of damage. Austin Dillon in the second Kaulig car, the number 10, he ended up 28th after getting into the wall, knocking the crush panels out. He was really in rough shape after that race because having the crush panels knocked out allowed a lot of heat inside the car, and it was actually the metal part of the seat that was burning his rib cage, and he actually had to get out of the car, and Daniel Hemrick got in for a little bit before they eventually decided to park that thing. Christopher Bell, again with tire issues, credited 31st. So it was definitely an entertaining race, partially because of the Cup Drivers Only broadcast, partially just it's fun to see Tyler Reddick increasing in his skill level as a second-year driver. So, yeah, very good Xfinity race at Charlotte. Moving on to the Coke 600, that was an entertaining race. Again, like I said last week, I've got to hand it to NASCAR for creating this aero package that has just made mile and a halfs something to sing this year. It doesn't do a whole lot at short tracks or super speedways or any of those other places, but mile and a halfs, my goodness, are entertaining this year. Let me do a quick rundown of the top 10 for the Cup race. Martin Truex Jr. wins, not in dominating fashion like he did a couple of years ago, and he actually had some adversity to overcome because he got into the wall with the tire issue, another Gibbs tire issue. Earlier in the race, he ends up winning the thing. Joey Logano second, Kyle Busch third, Chase Elliott fourth. Leading the banner for Hendrick Motorsports, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. fifth, first ever top 5 on a mile and a half for that 17 car, and Ricky Stenhouse Jr., which I was not aware of. Chris Buescher sixth, we'll talk about him later. Alex Bowman, Jimmy Johnson, William Byron 7, 8, 9. We'll also talk about them later. And Kevin Harvick 10th, leading the way for Stewart Haas Racing. Another story to talk about. Eric Almirola 11th. Corey LaJoie, quiet day, but finished 12th. That is a great day for that team. Some other highlights. David Reagan 15th, Ryan Newman 16th. Brad Keselowski back in 19th. Daniel Hemrick 21st. Clint Boyer 24th. Bubba Wallace 25th. Kurt Busch 27th after a crash or a spin. Kyle Larson 33rd. And Austin Dillon 34th after getting taken out in a wreck. Matt Benedetto 39th, and Eric Jones dead last in 40th. It was a crazy race, but it would be I would be missing something if I didn't talk about that moment of silence in the middle of the race. That was incredible. That gave me chills to see, because those race cars are loud, the fans are crazy, pit road is noisy. And for the entire sport to have almost a minute of dead silence was unbelievable. I would have loved to have been there for that. If you were there, let me know in the comments what you thought about that moment, because that was unbelievable to even just to watch on TV. It was just unreal. That's one of the things I love about NASCAR. NASCAR is probably the best sport in America at being patriotic and really showing support for our nation, our military. This whole Coke 600 weekend is built around patriotism and support for the military and support for the families of fallen soldiers. Everybody's got those names on the windshield. With pretty some of them pretty deep stories behind those names. The guy on William Byron's 24 car was a Liberty alumni. I heard a great story about the guy that was on Kyle Busch's car. There's a deep connection there. It's so cool. And that moment of silence, albeit short, was powerful and was something that you're probably not going to see in a whole lot of other American sports, which is a shame. But NASCAR does a really good job at things like that. That was really something to see, and just the whole military fanfare of this whole weekend. They had tanks and planes and just it was cool. It was really cool to see this weekend. Love that NASCAR does things like that. It's pretty special. It was an action-packed race for sure. The Coke 600. It was long. Like, we should just talk about that for a second. It was long. I know it's 600 miles, but with as long as that first stage took, with all the cautions and all the tire issues, and it was just like, it seemed like that first stage would never end, and it finally did, and it was just like, man, we are never going to finish this race. We eventually did, but it was pretty late. But it was definitely an action-packed race. A lot of guys up front. You were never quite sure who had the best car. And as the sun went down and the track changed, those top cars went in and out. You saw William Byron was probably one of the best cars in the daylight. When the sun went down, he dropped like a rock and really had some issues. Yeah. Again, the tire issues for Joe Gibbs Racing continued into the Coke 600 from the Xfinity race. If you count the 95, 4 out of the 5 of them had those tire issues and had pretty serious wall contact. Kyle Busch was the only one who didn't, but he still ended up with damage after his brother got into him. But yeah, it was crazy. You had Gibbs cars, you had Penske cars, you had Hendrick cars, you had almost everybody running up front at some point. Yeah, it was definitely entertaining. And again, kudos to NASCAR for this aero package, because it has made mile-and-a-half racing very entertaining. Those last couple of restarts were crazy. You had 4 wide at some point all race long, 4 and 5 wide, and passing and entertainment, and it was crazy. And you had that 4 wide pass for the lead and eventually the win by Martin Truex Jr. when David Reagan and Newman stayed out on that last restart. And Truex just dive bombed into the corner, took him 4 wide, and managed to come out on top and win the thing. And again, he had damage. He had got into the wall with that tire issue earlier in the race, and he had also inadvertently wrecked Bailey Curry in the 52. So it was a tough day for Truex, and he still managed to pull one out. It's his 3rd win of the year. That was cool to see. I like Truex. He's not my favorite, but he's definitely my favorite of the Gibbs guys. But yeah, it was really cool to see him pull that out. Big day for Hendrick Motorsports at one of their historically best tracks. You were wondering if the momentum from the All-Star and the Open was going to continue, and it did. All 4 of them ended up in the top 10. William led a lot of laps. Chase led some laps. It was cool to see Jimmy Johnson up in the mix again, running in the top 10, making passes, challenging. That car has really struggled over the past couple of years, and it's really good to see that 48 car getting closer to the front. I think as far as the teams right now, I'm still shocked by the lack of wins or even speed sometimes from Stewart-Haas Racing. I mean, they're not very good right now. I mean, I think as far as the major teams, I think Gibbs is on top, followed closely by Penske. Probably give number 3 to Hendrick, then Ganassi, and then Stewart-Haas. I'm shocked they haven't won yet. I mean, Harvick alone had like 5 or 6 wins by this point last year, and he's still winless so far. I'm very surprised by that, but yeah, it's hopefully they can get their stuff together, because I mean, Kevin Harvick especially is a guy that you're used to seeing challenging for wins every single week, and they just have not been there. They have really struggled this year, and hopefully they can get things turned around, because it's a shame for that team, and for a newly inducted Hall of Famer Tony Stewart, it's got to be a hassle or kind of an embarrassment to lead a team that was not even close the best team in NASCAR last year, and this year, I mean, they haven't been able to perform. So that's very odd, and I'm wondering when they're going to be able to turn things around. Last thing I want to talk about is Kyle Larson. The momentum did not continue from the $1 million All-Star win, and he struggled this weekend. Again, he was like third on one of the last restarts, and slipped, and then got himself in a bad position, and spun out into the corner and took out the Dillon brothers and Clint Boyer and a lot of guys. And it's a shame. Again, like I talked about last week, we're used to seeing that car running up front, challenging for wins, and you gotta be thinking, what in the heck is going on with that 42 car? He's used to. This is something I'm stealing from another YouTuber, but it's just interesting to think about that he comes from sprint car racing, which is you like those cars loose, and with this aero package, it's very difficult to make these cars loose. They're pretty tight handling from what I've heard, but also sprint racing, it's just that it's a sprint. It's pretty short, and these 400, 500, 600 mile races, you got to be wondering, does that fit into Kyle Larson's driving style? I don't know, but it's going to be interesting to see whether or not he can get the momentum turned around. A couple of years ago, I heard him say, he's probably not going to be in NASCAR for the long term. His long-term goal is to be full-time in World of Outlaws sprint car racing. So who knows how long he's going to be around? But I mean, you do start to feel for the guy after a while, where it's just like, man, if it weren't for bad luck, you'd have none at all. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see whether Ganassi and specifically Kyle Larson can kind of turn the tide on that. But all in all, the Coke 600 was a great race, entertaining from start to finish. A lot of different players, a lot of guys up front. You were never quite sure who had the best car, who was going to win, and that's what you want from a NASCAR race. It's Pocono this coming weekend, which is always a fun time. What turn for, as they say. So looking forward to that. It's gonna be good. Gonna be a good weekend, and again, I will be here at some point next week for my Pocono recap, and looking forward to what's next. So that's all I've got for today, and hope you guys enjoyed it. Leave a like and a comment, and hit subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see you guys next week for another episode of The Fifth Turn. See you guys later.